BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Nerd 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Recently on this channel, we were talking about Mae Brussell, who is well known for her program Dialogue Conspiracy, talking about conspiracy theories in general, and of course some claims that she made about the Zodiac killer and a particular suspect in that mystery named Robert Linkletter. And those episodes are in a three-part series here on this channel. The first one is called Zodiac Killer Robert Linkletter, Part 1 Introduction. And we also did a more general overview of Mae Brussell called The Death of Mae Brussell here on this channel, inviting you guys to check out some of that material. But I really found that I wanted to learn more about not only her theories about the Zodiac killer, but also just what she had to say in general. And there are many things that she has on YouTube, but I got on Amazon.com and I found something called Queen of Conspiracy, The Life and Times of Mae Brussell by Marie D. Jones. And this is not actually a book. Instead, it is an extended essay. The electronic version is 29 pages long, and it's the first time I've ever purchased an extended essay from Amazon.com, but it was only 99 cents. I didn't feel like I was breaking the bank. But to share some of the things, actually, first I should say this is not any type of traditional book review or essay review. Instead, this is just a discussion that we're having about the subject. We don't really do those things here on the channel, book reviews or movie reviews or essay reviews now. Instead, we're just going through some of the material that is mentioned here and talking about some comments that have been made about certain subjects. So what I would say, though, about this one here is where it begins is Mae Brussell is really just bothered by the concept of Lee Harvey Oswald being murdered. And she even says one thing in this, that her 7-year-old daughter, Bonnie, made a comment about how she's just thought that Lee Harvey Oswald was so troubled that she wanted to send him her favorite stuffed animal, to comfort him. Just that like a child could recognize that he seemed like somebody who was disturbed. And what I can say about Mae Brussell is this work here by Marie D. Jones really wants to focus in on the fact that she had a certain type of instinct that was pushing her to recognize something that was a dark, shadowy secret that has been withheld from the general public. And I think that this is how a lot of people go down the pathway of really learning more about government, learning more about international organizations, and learning about the interactions between different governments. And are there different interactions, or is there one group of individuals, as we said last time, like an oligarchy, where this group of people has the power, oligarchy, the few. It doesn't have to be necessarily a single government. Like the United States isn't necessarily the most powerful. The British Empire wasn't necessarily the most powerful, because through interactions, different people from various origins could be absorbed into the oligarchy. We've said a lot about that in the Death of Mae Brussell upload. So what I would like to do is expand upon to some of these other things here from this extended essay, and just talk about that. First and foremost, that it appears that the media is presenting things that are really packaged in a way in which that this entire concept of there is this evil, shadowy, secret network of operations doesn't exist. The MSM is all about denying that. And something told Mae Brussell that this wasn't quite happening. And if this stuff is true here in this essay, Mae Brussell figured out the actions of this shadowy network oligarchical complex to a T, to the point where she predicted the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy 1 week before it happened, if what they say in here is true. But I think we should actually just have a read here so we can see in Marie D. Jones's words about what is going on with that subject. Mae was so convinced of what she knew that on May 29th, 1968, she went to Monterey Peninsula Airport to meet Rose Kennedy and handed her a note telling her that Robert, or Bobby Kennedy, would soon be assassinated. 1 week later, Bobby was shot and killed at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, California. These were Mae's beliefs after 11 years of research and study. Enough, Mae laughed, to gain her the highest degree of any university had they offered a PhD in conspiracy theory. The large plot that Mae spoke of took on the form of a huge, ghastly octopus with tentacles reaching into the highest halls of government, military, and business institutions. And it's the first time that I've ever heard this exact metaphor used, the octopus. Like we're talking about oligarchy, and I mean, that's the name that I'm giving to it. That's the name that some other people have given to it. But do you actually think that just like it's like an octopus, rather than just a group of individuals sitting around a boardroom table making decisions about how the world should function? Instead, it seems something like something rather to the contrary. As she said here, this octopus, maybe there's a brain that is a little bit more powerful, but the grasp and the tentacles can go out in 8 different directions, going through 8 different systems all at once. But it really expands upon the subject, because there are other examples here other than just Robert F. Kennedy. Firstly, we said John Kennedy, right? Assassinated. Robert F. Kennedy assassinated. And then even talking about Mahatma Gandhi as he was assassinated. And a claim that, as I understand from this, that Mae Brussell made is that these assassinations are not just lone gunmen. They aren't just one individual who is some type of lone kook who goes crazy, who feels like they are rejected. And it's not just the workings of a single madman. If I can follow the narrative, it's trying to say that all of these things are orchestrated, and that there are major operations that happen behind them, that just this is one of the ways to take people out. This is one of the ways in which this octopus-like oligarchical structure can enforce its destructive behavior to enhance its own power grab by getting rid of political leaders who are somewhat detrimental. And I mean, we talked about Gandhi. We can also say Martin Luther King Jr. And the other ones that we have listed. So I think that that's absolutely fascinating. And one point I definitely would agree with is the MSM does favor the lone gunman, single lone wolf, crazy nut theory. Anytime that there are these things, like look what we said about Lee Harvey Oswald, Sirhan, who shot Bobby Kennedy, James Earl Ray, who shot Martin Luther King, that all of these individuals are just lone gunmen who are very much opposed to something, so they take matters into their own hands. It never wants to look at the interactions that they've had with other people, or about why they became so opposed to things. And I think that that's a very valuable discussion to have. But, I mean, the claim, though, as a conspiracy theorist is, how do you have enough proof to substantiate your claims? Because Mae Brussell would really go beyond just simply saying that, okay, there's this network behind somebody like Lee Harvey Oswald or Jack Ruby, or there's some type of thing going on in the shadows. Well, number one, what is it? And number two, how do you know about it? Number three, how does this thing work? I found it rather fascinating in this early part of the essay that there's Mae Brussell is talking about how a lot of people believe that John F. Kennedy was involved in a conspiracy. And I mean, the assassination of Kennedy was a conspiracy. A conspiracy definitely took place, and that it was orchestrated by elements of the mafia and elements of the CIA. And that it's, when we say the mafia, it all ties into being anti-Fidel Castro, and JFK wouldn't go along with the anti-Fidel Castro agenda, so that's why he was taken out, and for various reasons. And I'm really not an expert on the Kennedy assassination. I'm just regurgitating some things from this essay here. But Mae Brussell rejected that whole thing, that it's the CIA and the mafia working together, or that it's a race between the CIA and the mafia to have Kennedy assassinated, because of something that we would have here in that I'll actually read right now. Mae Brussell was actually going down more of the pathway that there is a particular element in these types of conspiracy theory discussions that is heavily neglected, and that is the role of the former Nazi Party of Germany. And let's look at some of what is written here. Nazis holding great positions of power and influence in the United States, the land of democracy and freedom. These Nazis, mainly scientists, military officials, engineers, and weapons experts, had been secretly smuggled into the United States after World War II on full knowledge of the CIA, who actually had a hand in getting them safely to U.S. shores. Operation Paperclip, also called Project Paperclip, was a top-secret government program of integrating Nazi top dogs into American society, and thanks to the power of the Freedom of Information Act, the once classified program was now seeing the public light. Mae Brussell's research suddenly took a sharp turn to the right, to the extreme, as she realized that the international terrorist network that made up the Axis powers during World War II had effectively gone underground and continued their worldwide campaign of fascist rule even after Hitler was pronounced dead. So, I mean, Mae Brussell said this, we said this about Mae Brussell in our upload, The Death of Mae Brussell, when we're just looking at, she really wanted to highlight that Nazi connections exist, and it's being heavily neglected for just the reason that you heard right there. It's one of the things that's really left out of a lot of these conspiratorial dialogues. And I would like to reinforce something that I've said about this subject in the past. It doesn't only have to be the Axis powers. I mean, maybe what she is saying there is true, but as we go through these types of examinations, we can see that the Axis powers and the Central powers had working relationships, and it definitely relates to finance. And when we explored a particular book on this channel once, it was all about how the Nazi economics and finance minister, up to 1938, Helmar Schacht, was on very good terms with the British government and the British Department and Ministry of Finance, as well as looking at some other things. And it's going to get much larger, pulling in people like Prescott Bush and all of these things. And that's an entirely different setup right there. But it really just goes to show you that there is a powerful class, and then there is a not so powerful class. And one more thing to say on that particular note is that when these concentrations of wealth and power get pushed into certain areas, guess what? That means that the few have more than the rest of us. And that creates the concept of oligarchy, or that there is a concentration of wealth that coincides with a concentration of power. And this leads to certain things like the ruling class. This leads to certain things like what we could be talking about here: international terrorist networks. And one of the very difficult things for us in the general public is when we're listening to people like Mae Brussell, or perhaps another conspiracy theorist. You can even plug in whatever conspiracy theorist first comes to mind. You can just wonder how much of what they're saying is true and how much of it is inaccurate. Or how about looking at it from this particular perspective? How much of what they're saying is true and how much of it is metaphorical, or it's just making a lot of noise to draw attention to other particular issues? And here's an even better question for you. If you're listening to somebody who's a conspiracy theorist, what should we say though about like the levels of truth? Like, are there international terrorist network organizations that are responsible for things like the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the assassination of Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi? Or are these people taken up by lone wolf radicals who are just on the fringe of society, and they're just loose cannons, and they're just total outlaws who are at the verge of exploding at any minute? Or is there something else going on? Are they actually connected to either some type of, it doesn't even necessarily have to be an active participant in the network, because this is a whole different set of issues. They could be part of some type of mind control program. And when they say mind control program, I think that it's going down somewhat the pathway of the Manchurian Candidate, where someone can just snap into kill mode using a certain set of parameters. Maybe the Winter Soldier is even another example from fictitious literature, if you'd want to call it that, of how that could be done. And Mae Brussell talked about this a lot because it's a very large theory that is connected to the Manson family. And Mae Brussell explored the Zodiac Manson connection, but just looking at how certain people can be programmed to kill. And it's all about expanding military technology. There was this, I believe it was Czechoslovakian at the time, is a theorist named Ivan Bloch, who talked about how the progressions of military technology would overextend its range over humanity, meaning that military technology would become so powerful that humanity will not be able to survive it. And when you start talking about things like trying to program humans to turn them into killbots, that's kind of going down the pathway. I'm sure he was directing those comments to more things like artillery and like the development of firearms, let alone fighter jets and the nuclear bomb, the atomic bomb, all of those things. I think that's more of what Ivan Bloch was talking about. But if we're going to be examining it from the human social element, if these things are actually possible. And it definitely does appear that the CIA, as well as other governmental organizations, and we're doing experiments on people to push the limits of humanity to see how the human being responds to conditions. And is it possible to turn people into certain types of super warriors? Or, well, I mean, when I say things like killbot and super warriors, I really feel that that might be distorting the message. I think that it's more about certain things could be put in place that would make this person very dangerous and a very powerful force that would be set on a particular target, and that's killing other human beings. I think that that is more about it. So when people say things like killbot and super soldier, I would really hope that there is a certain sense of sincerity in that. And that's just a claim that was made by Mae Brussell as well as some other conspiracy theorists out there. But another point that we should always be aware of and not listening to the mainstream media is that conspiracies can turn out to be true. I can say that I am not a big enough expert on Operation Paperclip to give a well-formulated opinion on that specific subject, but I sure hope to go down that pathway in the future just to get an answer to something like that. Was the CIA, as well as other elements of the United States government, because the CIA was really on the rise after World War II. A lot of the things with the CIA happened in 1947. But if we're going to go down that pathway, what really happened? Did the United States government, the CIA, and the private arms of the global elites, this octopus that Mae Brussell was thinking, like this conspiratorial octopus, did this actually happen? And what were the steps? Because, I mean a lot of people are going to provide their explanations for something, but the historian Patricia Crone said something very clearly when she was like, never substitute torturous reasoning for hard evidence. And that is one quote that has always stayed with me. So you can find that a lot of people, and perhaps even Mae Brussell to a certain extent, would give their explanations about how they believe that something was happening. And with Mae Brussell, I can say that perhaps it's a little bit more difficult to accept her claims about the Zodiac Killer and the Zodiac Manson connection, because I feel that a lot of that is based on not even circumstantial evidence. It's more what we said about substituting torturous reasoning for hard evidence. There's a lot of torturous reasoning involved in the claims that Mae Brussell made about the Zodiac Killer and the Zodiac Manson connection. But instead, when we're talking about the concept of government, that, I think, instead, is one that is very, very much a good point to argue. And that's something that you can wrap your head around. Are there elements of in the United States government that are doing these conspiratorial actions? Yes or no? And let's try and find out. Let's follow the paper trails and let's listen to what different people have to say. Let's examine the ideas and let's try to just get some definitive answers. Another thing that is mentioned in this essay here about Mae Brussell is that these were things that she really was not able to share too easily. And they're talking about how, as a housewife, taking her daughter to a dance class and trying to talk to people about these subjects, it just doesn't fly over. And I mean, I really don't even want to go down the pathway of saying, well, people didn't want to listen to her because she was a woman. I don't even want to have that conversation right now. Instead, what I can say is, no matter who you are, these are not easy things to talk about. Have you ever been to like a cocktail party or something and started talking about true crime and conspiracy theories and like secret military operations? A lot of people just simply do not want to hear about this stuff. They are very dismissive, and it's not 100% that they are disagreeing with you or that they don't believe what you're saying. It's really just a point where they were like, I don't want to think about that right now. Because as we said, though, there is this dark, shadowy secret that is being shielded from us. And somebody like Mae Brussell wanted to plunge right into that and wanted to find out, what is the dark, shadowy secret? But instead, I think a lot of people really just want to keep the blinders on, and that they just don't necessarily want to even go down that pathway. Maybe you can think of Plato's allegory of the cave or something to that effect. Or perhaps other people are just more concerned with the materialist image, and that's how this octopus-like conspiratorial oligarchical monster can hide in plain sight, because other people simply do not want to care about it. But what do you think about that? And first and foremost, do you believe that the octopus is an accurate representation of this type of international terrorist network that is sponsored by global elites? Do you believe that that is an accurate representation? Or if not, what do you think would be a better way to represent the subject? And I would love to hear your responses in the comments section below. What do you have to say about this? What do you have to say about any of the material that we've covered? What would you like to challenge? What do you agree with or disagree with? And if you do disagree with something, I would love to hear your explanation why. Challenge these things. If you don't accept any of the claims that we've made here, talking about the Nazis and Operation Paperclip, or just even the concept of how one of the heavily neglected elements in conspiratorial discussions is the fact that elements of the Axis powers made their way into the United States circles and the United States elite classes, the United States elite circles. They contain elements of the Axis powers from World War II and Nazi Germany and so on. Please share something in the comment section below. What do you have to say? And I will see you guys on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.